Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Adult Book Talks with Miss Bookie. Tonight we're going to be discussing several titles, so I want to get started. The first book we're going to talk about is called The Lacuna by Barbara Kingsolver, and it's one of my favorites. What do an American boy growing up in Mexico, a plaster mixer for Diego Rivera, a cook for Frida Kahlo, a secretary for Lev Trotsky, and a writer from New England have in common? In this novel, they're all the same person. Harrison Shepard is an unremarkable man who leads a remarkable life. At 13, as a boy growing up in Mexico, his mother encourages him to write everything down in a journal. That way, if anything happens to them, someone will know. There's no school on the island, so his mom's boyfriend gives him 4 books at the beginning of every week and keeps the rest of his collection under lock and key. Out of boredom and wanting to stay out of sight, Harrison spends a lot of time in the kitchen where he befriends a cook who gives him a pair of goggles that allows him to explore the island and learn all of its secrets. He also learns how to make the perfect pastry dough. Years later, this skill helps him get a job with Diego Rivera mixing his plaster because Rivera likes his plaster to be smooth without any lumps and to be just the right consistency. After him and Harrison become friends, he gets a job as a cook in the Diego Kahlo household working for Diego Rivera and his wife Frida Kahlo. When Lev Trotsky is exiled from Russia and flees to Mexico, he moves in with Diego and Kahlo, and Harrison, with his writing and typing skills, becomes the perfect choice for secretary. After Trotsky's murder, Harrison heads back to the United States where he begins writing, never guessing that his relationship and friendships with Rivera, Kahlo, and Trotsky would make him the subject of an FBI and Senate investigation as somebody who's a communist supporter. Harrison Shepard hasn't had a lot of happy endings in his life, but if you want to know how this story ends, you're going to have to read The Lacuna by Barbara Kingsolver. The next book I'm going to talk about is the latest from author Sherman Alexie, called Blasphemy. This collection of short stories features old favorites and new titles. It includes a unique cast of characters facing a variety of dilemmas. In The Approximate Size of My Favorite Tumor, James Many Horse's wife has left him because he refuses to take his cancer seriously. In Cry, 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 Jr., a well-known powwow dancer, loses first his teeth and then everything else to meth. In Night People, an insomniac develops a crush on the woman who works at the 24-hour nail salon across the street from his apartment. In Indian Education, we go on a grade-by-grade journey with Junior Palotkin. He writes this about his experiences in 9th grade. At the Farmtown High School dance, after a basketball game in an overheated gym where I scored 27 points and pulled down 13 rebounds, I passed out during a slow song. As my white friends revived me and prepared to take me to the ER, where I would later be diagnosed with diabetes, the Chicano teacher ran up to us. "Hey," he said, "what's that boy been drinking? I know all about these Indian kids. They start drinking real young." Sharing dark skin doesn't necessarily make 2 men brothers. If you're interested in contemporary Indian life and don't mind a little bit of sex, drugs, and violence, you should check this book out. So tonight's talks are featuring some really great characters, and we're going to continue that with Catherine Stockett's The Help. Imagine this. Every morning you get out of bed, don a crisp white uniform, and take the bus across town to clean someone else's house, cook someone else's meals, and care for someone else's children. On Monday, you oil the furniture. On Tuesday, you wash and iron the damn sheets. On Wednesday, you scrub the tub real good. On Thursday, you polish the floors and vacuum the rugs. And on Friday, you do the heavy cooking for the weekend. Every day is mopping, washing clothes, ironing shirts, and generally keeping things clean. Silver and windows as needed. Eugenia is a young white woman who just returned from college, without the expected husband, but with a degree. She wants to write the story of black domestic workers and the white families they work for. Aibileen is the first woman to agree to participate. She's cared for over 17 white babies, and the memories of that help fill a small part of the hole that was left behind when her son was killed. Minnie is a reluctant participant, and her short temper has gotten her fired from more than one job. Actually, more than 10 jobs. But she's more scared of her husband finding out what she's doing than the KKK. The women must meet in secret, Eugenia must write in secret, and the names and places must be changed. Protecting the participant becomes even more important when beatings, arrests, and the murder of Medgar Evers puts the whole town on edge. The women struggle to finish by the deadline, but not arouse suspicion. As the deadline nears, the women come across a little bit of insurance that will protect themselves from discovery. But as the book becomes more popular and people start making connections, they worry if they've made a terrible mistake. And I highly recommend The Help by Catherine Stockett. As you can see, I like books where I get a lot of different perspectives from different characters. And that is true for our next book, Game of Thrones. Most of you have probably heard of the HBO series Game of Thrones, and I like the show so much that I downloaded the first 4 books to my phone, and I haven't been able to put them down. So, the series is called The Song of Fire and Ice by George R.R. Martin, and Game of Thrones is actually the first book in the series. The story, it's actually 3 stories in one book. The main story is about the Starks of Winterfell. The patriarch, Eddard Stark, is called to serve the king as his right hand. As a further way to connect the 2 families, Eddard's daughter Sansa is betrothed to the king's son Joffrey, who's the next in line for the throne. After he accepts the position, but before he's even left his home, the treachery has already begun, and it follows him all the way to King's Landing. There's a poisoning, 2 murder attempts on one of his sons, a dagger whose owner has some explaining to do, his daughter's wolf is killed, his baseborn son is exiled, his wife's fingers are almost severed, one of his daughters takes up sword fighting, he discovers the queen's deepest secrets, and somebody's head will roll. That's just one thread of the story, and we haven't even begun to discuss the dragons. I'm telling you, read this book, it's great. That's The Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. That's our last title for tonight. I hope you've all found something interesting that you might be interested in reading, and I'll be available for any questions afterwards if you have any. So thank you everyone, and that's Adult Book Talks with Miss Bookie.